I think we're ready to get going. And welcome everybody again. I'm Susie Ray, Chair of San Mateo County Democracy for America. We have a terrific speaker tonight, and I'm going to hand over to Elsa to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Susie. Sorry.
I'm going to do one more thing. We're going to do a Q&A afterwards, and we will take questions, and what we'll do is use the raise hand to put yourself into the queue to ask questions. So I'll turn that over now, and if everyone would mute themselves until we're doing the Q&A. Thanks. Elsa.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you, Noelia, for coming to chat with us and this early in your new term and your new role. Part of me thinks that's brave. Part of me also thinks we're here to influence you to a degree. Also, we'll warn you of that ahead of time. But we so look forward to hearing your priorities, but also this fascinating array of committees that you've already been put on. And I think the influence you're going to be able to spread through that is amazing. So Noelia Corzo, a number of us know her from her campaign, some from before that as well. She was new to me before a year and a half ago, and I am stunned more than anything else by her decisiveness, her leadership, her ability to deliver very firm guidelines and messages with a smile on her face. That to me is a hell of a good leader. Noelia actually came from a family of immigrants. She's lived in San Mateo County most of her life and lives in that city right now. She is locally educated. She has a wonderful young son who's just now entering his teenage years, and you can imagine what that's like. She is a single mother, and instead of having come up the city council route, she became, she's a social worker also. She became a board member of the largest school system in our county, and it's a huge one, San Mateo Foster City. And she was on that board not only for 5 years, including heading the board, but COVID hit right in the middle of that experience base. And there's so much evidence of the new programs she was able to introduce by listening to parents and listening to students and teachers and realizing in that completely different world, what creative new solutions would be helpful to come up with that nobody had ever thought of before, nobody had ever seen exist. And she is so approachable, she's so smart, and so able to put different silos together into that new appropriate, better solution, that watching that and just seeing her unfold that way, or unfold for us what she's doing, has been phenomenal. I love how comfortable you are, Noelia, with small groups, with one-on-one, as well as with very big groups. And I just think we're unbelievably lucky to have our very first Latina on the board. And this is the board that has a $4.2 billion budget every year of our taxpayer dollars. So to be able to have our first Latina, who is also the only woman on the board and the only person of color on the board, all in one body, in a county that is 62% people of color, is not only shocking and mind-blowing, but suggests that she needs a little company. Like next time we need 3 board members who fit some of that profile. So watch this space as we also, I hope, help that come along. Noelia, as I said, didn't come up the city council route, which so many of her comrades on that board have done, and her competitors in the last election. And yet she held sway and has such a great grassroots support base. She did so with a lot of the top guns in the party endorsing different people. And I just want to say, watch out, world. Noelia Corzo, what are your priorities and what are you looking forward to?
Thank you, Elsa. Thank you all for inviting me to connect with you. I will say one of my top priorities is to have a strong practice of community engagement. That is something that has been a part of how I have done work in this community. Being a former community organizer, I worked with Faith in Action several years ago. And it's also really important to me that I am transparent in the way that I lead and in the way that I make decisions. As I hope many of you know, in San Mateo County, as part of our budget, we do have over $100 million in tax revenue from a measure called Measure K. And we, as a board, are going through a process right now where we are providing direction and guidance on how that will be spent. The priorities that we identified for that, the top two were definitely housing and then children and youth. So let me just backtrack for a second. I want to share that one of my biggest priorities right now is to listen and learn and to take everything in, because I have been assigned to over 20 committees, including the Commission on the Status of Women, the Youth Commission, the Arts Commission. I could list them all, but they range from, and I'm actually on the Air District Board that was mentioned earlier. And just today went all the way out to Emeryville for a retreat with the Air District Board of Directors and spent over 5 hours in that retreat. And so a lot of these assignments that I expressed interest in, some were assigned to me. They all require learning, right? I am stepping into committees that have existing work that I need to learn about. And it's one of my main priorities to really challenge myself to identify what the opportunities are to enact lasting change. And that is definitely dependent on my ability to communicate out to folks in the community. Because of my lived experience and how I grew up in this community, I do have some natural connections already to folks that typically wouldn't know much about government and how and what the opportunities are to influence decision making. And I have to say that I'm one of my areas of growth will be in the coming weeks and months will be to improve how I'm communicating out what I'm learning and what the opportunities are. There are many competing priorities, and I just made it past my second month, and I was chatting with President Pine yesterday, and I asked them, would you call this a typical first 2 months for a supervisor? And he actually told me no, that because of, not just the natural disasters, but other things that are coming to light right now, it's not a typical way to start. And that being said, I'm up to the challenge, but it definitely is something that is challenging. And reminding myself to give myself the same grace I would give others when they're walking into a space where there is a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of practice in terms of how things are done, and first of all, learning how things are done, but then beyond that, challenging that a bit in a way that brings people in and doesn't create division. Because again, I was on a board that was very diverse, majority women, in a school district that was also very diverse. And now walking into a space where that's not the case, but everyone has been very welcoming. So I just want to make sure I'm clear about that piece. Everyone is definitely very welcoming, but it's also true that it just kind of, it feels very different for me. And so different for me. And so, you know, I think a priority for me is also to just like stay really grounded in myself and challenge myself to continue some of the work I try to do on a personal level, and I'll share a little bit about that, but some of that work is really kind of around decolonization and sharing power. And I've done that on my team, and I'm pushing myself to continue to do that. And also staying connected to other spaces and other groups where I am able to not just communicate, but like be a partner in the work. This being one of them, but also, you know, still staying connected to the school board that I was a part of, still staying connected to leaders in our county with shared values. And all of that takes time and intention. And so, yeah, I'll also share that I probably before the election last year, so many years ago, actually, Mayor Amarance Lee had the North Central community. North Central San Mateo is where I grew up, and still a community I'm very connected to. So she coordinated North Central San Mateo as a community applying for a grant through the Koshland Fellowship Program, which is a program out of the San Francisco Foundation. And actually North Fair Oaks had previously been a part of this program many, many years ago. And so I was lucky enough to be selected as one of the fellows. And that work is one that really has like reminded me of what it means to approach this kind of work through a decolonization lens, which is really about being very inclusive and sharing power and challenging the status quo and so obviously that, you know, that is a little bit in conflict with like being in a typical government setting. And so just pushing myself to think through that lens and to find those opportunities. So I'll pause there. I'm happy to answer any questions. And actually, let me also just share I won't share them all because there's 20, but some of the committee assignments that probably where I see a lot of opportunity to create some change. So I'm on the Behavioral Health Commission. I already mentioned the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, the Big Lift Initiative, which is essentially an educational equity initiative that the county funds every year for about $8.5 million. The Domestic Violence Council, the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council is a big one, I think, where there will be opportunities for some change. The San Mateo County Community Action Agency is it's funny because it sounds weird to call it an agency, but it's basically a group that works with the humans, with HSA. And yeah, the Commission on the Status of Women and the Youth Commission as well.
Okay, well, we'll open it up for Q&A. And I see Marshall's already got his hand up. So we'll start with Marshall.
Well, nobody else did, and I wasn't going to let that vacuum last very long. Noelia, it's so good to see you. You know, I had met you before and learned a lot about the things that you have done. One of the main kinds of things that I'm interested in is how the county can move forward in getting countywide action and county resident action, more action on ameliorating the climate issue by electrifying. Do you have any ideas and plans how the county can move the electrification efforts forward more quickly?
So, right now, I would say I probably don't have the best answer for you. Maybe in a couple months, I'll have a better response, but definitely, I think there are the planning commission probably makes some of these decisions, and then also through the air district, actually, it hasn't come up very much in our meetings, and so that is something that I'm hoping will happen soon. Yeah, that I'm not quite sure at the moment.
All right. Ashley?
Hi, Noelia. We think of the county as being very progressive, and it's reflected in the way that we vote in the elections, general elections. But our ruling bodies have, despite our progressive lean, have remained quite conservative and kind of an old boys club. And here you come along and join the Board of Supervisors, coming from a completely different background, representing a different, really representing what we think of as the grassroots. I'd like to know a little bit about your background and what made you decide that the Board of Supervisors was for you.
Thank you. That's a great question. Ooh. I think about my time as president in 2020, and that is really where I feel like the seed was planted for me, of just feeling very disconnected from our county. And yes, our county has done some really good work, but feeling that disconnect through my lens as a school board member, it's not a judgment at all, but I never was able to have a conversation with Carol Groomer during that time, and felt like that would have been helpful. And also just seeing, all of the funds that the county granted to, for like the county approved to support the community, and then knowing that not all of those funds were actually dispersed, not because there wasn't a need, but because something in that system and in that process, there was a kink there that just, it wasn't working well. And the need that I was seeing through being on the school board, being a part of my community, and also as a social worker for Golden Gate Regional Center at that time, I just, everywhere I looked, I was seeing people in need, and felt disconnected from the county. And I feel like I got to a point where I asked myself a question, and I said, what does this community have to lose? And then what does this community have to gain? What does our community have to gain if they have a different choice? And I decided to just go for it and see what happened, and give the community a different choice. And I really, when I ran for school board in 2017, I feel like I asked myself the same question, and I was like, there's no way that this community will elect, I think at that time I was like 25 or 26. No, I think I was 26, a 26-year-old single mom that grew up in North Central San Mateo. And the community showed up and surprised me, and didn't just surprise me, but like, I felt like they showed up. I felt held, I felt supported, I felt seen. And I felt like this county deserved that opportunity again, and that our community would choose. You know, what kind of experiences do we value? What kind of perspectives do we want to see in leadership? Do we want to see more women? Do we want to see more people of color? Okay, here is a concrete choice that this community will have. And if I hadn't run, that choice might not have been there. It likely wouldn't have been there. And, you know, I thought back on all of the years that I had put into the school board and the work that I had done there. And I felt proud of that work. And, you know, the work is never done, but also I felt like I had done work that would continue to grow and build, whether I was there or not. And if I wasn't sure of that, I would have never ran. And I felt like our community needed and deserved that same opportunity in that different setting. So that's all part of what led me to throw my hat in the race, and yeah, and to put myself out there. And I felt again like, you know, our community showed up, and we showed our values. And I actually remember I remember asking the question, you know, we talk so much about equity, and this county and the county talks so much about equity, but like when there's a mirror in front of you and you are given a clear choice, you know, make that choice and then look yourself in the mirror. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to hold up a mirror to people and say, and ask, you know, what do you actually value? Will you make a decision that's in line with your values, or will we talk about things but then not walk the walk?
Wow. Oh, thank you. Bill, you're up.
Okay, I've unmuted myself. And now I'm going to take my hand down so there'll be no confusion about that. Where do I start, Noelia? First off, I'll just say once again, so proud of you. So proud to have you as our representative, because I feel like, yeah, you represent San Mateo, your district, but I feel like there's so many of us that believe in you, that you're our representative across the county, and for a lot of different groups across the county. And I think maybe you know that and you're aware of that too, just because of your own associations. And I also feel like, you know, you and Ray, just in the brief time you guys have been on the county board, I feel a real different vibe now than I felt before the election. I feel like an excitement. There's some real possibilities that weren't there before, and along with the fact that we got Christina elected too, just gives me so much hope and faith. You know, having said all that, I know you're in a big learning curve mode, and that's to be expected, and I wouldn't expect it to be any other way for you. I think that's, you know how to become effective. But in order to be effective, you have to know what all the tools are you're going to need in your box to build the house. And so more power to you for that. So I guess what I want to ask you is, given the short time that you've been there, what you have been able to learn, what you have been able to hear from the community. I mean, some of it's pretty obvious. We had the storm, we had the tragic deaths of the farm working people in Half Moon Bay, but I also think it helped shine a light on some issues that I think the county has sort of buried in the past. County, I always felt kind of didn't want to take on stuff, or they kick, you know, the proverbial can down the road. So I guess what I want to ask you is simply where you're at, just beyond the learning, beyond the committees that you're becoming a part of. Just what's the urgency now, what you're hearing? And I guess I'll just throw in my own bias, and that is that I don't think we can move too fast on the need for housing in our community. It's such an incredible urgent need that the divide that we see between the haves and the have-nots, and how we're gonna bridge that gap or address that. So I'll get off of my soapbox, but I want to just let you know that there's a lot of people out there behind you in terms of what you're trying to do, and know you have, and don't be afraid to reach out for whatever support you need.
Thank you so much. And you reminded me that there are some opportunities and work that's already in process. So actually week 1, Warren Slocum, Supervisor Slocum invited me to work on updating a tenant protection ordinance for our county. And so we've been working on that since week 1 and hoping to bring that forward in a couple of months. And that's to say that I also just want to say that Supervisor Slocum and I probably won't agree on everything. So we will, move forward with what we agree with. And later on, I may move something forward myself or with someone else on the board, just depending on where we get with that. The housing element, though, will likely come back to the county, and I don't believe has been approved, but I've actually already requested that our board hasn't discussed the housing element and what the implications are since I've been on the board, and I want an opportunity to do that. So that will be moving forward. Yes, and I'm sorry, I think part of your question, there was a question in there, escaped me for a second. So I don't know if you want to remind me or if we just want to move on to the next question.
Just kind of what have you been hearing while you've been there, just for the 2 months? What kind of feedback, maybe new voices that we haven't heard from before, new voices you haven't heard from before, that maybe feel some investment with the community that they felt they didn't have before, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. I have a really concrete one. So the Community Action Agency, and I'm trying to find this acronym because I don't want to butcher it. So the Community Action Agency and the Human Services, so that agency and that group is a space where it's essentially like the Human Service Agency partners with nonprofits. The core agencies and the Human Service Agency, it's like they're outward facing group, and they're actually our community members. And I can tell you that me being in that meeting and knowing that there were some Spanish speakers in the meeting that were receiving translation, I actually spoke to them in Spanish. And then it was kind of like opening the floodgates, because I could literally tell that they hadn't spoken up about many of the issues that they raised before. And they had been a part of this group for I don't know how long. I'm actually working on figuring that out. But just because I was there and I spoke Spanish, folks definitely opened up about some concerns that they hadn't shared before. And I think that can be because some of these meetings, and let's say, even commissions, for example, can be really inaccessible to folks that speak a different language or don't know all of the lingo. And so I felt really grateful that they felt comfortable enough to speak, and I'm going to be meeting with them outside of that, and also looking at how we can make the meetings more accessible, and how we can continue to hear those voices and maybe make the meetings a little longer, or just like better integrate space for them into the meetings. And also with the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, I already recognize that in that space, just comparing that space to some other committees or groups, there's not, material like a memo or a PowerPoint or, like documents that are shared before the meeting. And they should be, right? It's a really important council with many important decisions being made. And when I walked into that room, and I was in this room with over 30 people, 25 to 30 people, including representatives from the DA, from behavioral health services, from a judge was there for the from the youth services center. And so a lot of powerful people in the room, and just I definitely got the sense that there was only just a less than a handful of people talking the entire meeting, and everything was verbal. And so, I'll be meeting with the chief of probation and just giving some of that feedback, because I think that needs to be different, especially if we're going to create transparency and trust with the community. Also looking at some of like the term limits. So there are community members on that council as well. And I don't have an understanding of how these people are selected, or how long they've been on their terms, or when the opportunities for new folks to come in will be. And I think that's important for me to know, but that's important for everyone to know. And sorry, my son's over there. you may have seen them in the back. That's for those two committees there, but there's many others beyond that. And so I've made it a priority, and I've done this in the Youth Commission and with the Commission on the Status of Women, as well as the Behavioral Health Commission. Like, I want to partner with you in this work. Like, tell me what you feel like are the opportunities to create some change, and then give me some time to do that, right? And I can set boundaries about what I will feel comfortable doing and when, but I definitely want to hear the ideas. Ask me, and let's strategize on that, and let's move some of that work forward.
Thank you. I will kind of piggyback on what you were just saying first, because one of the things I'm hearing you say is that you're going to make these meetings, which tend to be intimidating I'm thinking for an English speaker, it's intimidating, let alone someone who's Spanish speaking or Chinese or any of the other languages. But the fact that you're trying to open these meetings so that everyone feels welcome and feels like they can say something, rather than being intimidated to shut up and listen and not become involved. So bravo. If you only do that in your first term, well, that would be terrific. The other thing I wanted to say was that you're already starting as a really good communicator. I got an email newsletter the other day. Bravo! It was filled with here's my staff. And you've had your first coffee. That was terrific. I was happy that I got to stop by. Absolutely terrific start for the communication side of it. I was wondering, how does one get on your mailing list? So I'll ask that question. But what I really want you to discuss is, how do we encourage more, particularly young women, to run for office? And what's really critical is you've got to have the voices on, like, school board, because the school board is one of the most important things in my community that affects my neighborhood. How do you get, running for office is it's so ugly. How do we encourage people to, just try it? And like you did, that brought a lot of community organizing coming with you, because we wanted your voice. And I'm wondering, what words do you have to help us encourage more young people to run for office?
Thank you. So let me answer your first question, because that one's easy. Right now, we are working, my team and I, the D2 team, we're working on updating my website. So that will happen soon. And then folks will be able to go there. Not my website, I'm sorry. Well, actually, yes, my campaign website, and then also my page on the county. So we're working on kind of updating both, and we will be putting, working on making updates there so that folks can sign up easily there. And then, I'll probably be sharing that on social media as well. That's a great idea. And then to your second question, you know, for me, so one of the themes that I'm hearing is that it's kind of like a what is it? Catch 22? Is that what it is? A catch 22. Where I'm hearing that there's not enough community-based organizations and there's not enough support for, you know, uplifting historically excluded communities. And then I'm also hearing that there's all this money that the county and even like the probation department want to put into communities and empowering communities, and yet there's something that happens in the middle there that just, like, again, is a disconnect. And it has to do with how we are supporting nonprofits. It has to do with how we are coordinating with our school districts. I really would love to see like a really well-resourced and well-funded mentorship program in this county. Some nonprofits already exist and do some of that work, but there's not enough funding for that specifically, because it really has to start at a younger age. And I'll speak just for myself. You know, it took actually Mayor Amarantz Lee, after a couple of years of friendship, it took, actually, maybe it wasn't that many years of friendship. It was like in our first year of friendship, now that I think about it. It took probably 8 to 10 times of her asking me and encouraging me to run and committing to supporting me and like running my campaign for me to even consider it. Sorry, my dog. And so I know that I'm sorry, he's having a moment. Can you give him what he wants? Give him whatever. Sorry. My son's eating pizza. I think he wants pizza, but I actually don't think you should give him that. So we're going to try to distract him. Something that I did during my campaign and I'm committed to continuing to do is going into, I've actually spoken to classrooms, and I wasn't there to make a pitch for people to vote for me, but I was there to just talk about my experience, my path towards elected office, and then my experience in elected office and the opportunities that I saw to create change. And I've spoken in high schools as well. And so I think that's something that I want to continue to do, but I really think that other folks that are in elected positions also should do. I remember being in the 2nd grade, and at the time, Mayor Claire Mack she came to my classroom and she spoke, and I still remember that to this day, you know, and seeing someone that was a woman of color in that position, just even seeing someone and knowing that it can happen, right? Yeah, I think I'm working on developing a more like concrete like action plan for that, but it's definitely a priority for me. And I do think that that there are other people in this community that want to see that happen as well. And so it's just about creating a network and yeah, maybe adding some funding to it. So yeah, I'll share more. But also, before I forget, I'm going to be working on a strategic plan for District 2, but also just for my work in general. And so there will be opportunities for folks to provide input and be a part of that process. Community engagement, again, will be like a core part of that. And so, yeah, whenever, please be on the lookout for those opportunities, probably like May or June.
Awesome. And that's one of the things we'd be happy to spread the word. So let us know. I'll make sure I'll be watching for newsletters, but please do. All right, Diana, you're next.
Thank you, Noelia. Thank you again for being with us tonight. This is really powerful stuff, and we're really proud of you. Several of us have worked over the years several times with the former sheriff and had mixed experiences in terms of advocating for transparency and other things that apparently were unreasonable for the sheriff's department to consider. And so I'm curious about your role with our new sheriff and what you see as opportunities to support her with the goals that she might have.
Yes, thank you. So I have met with Christina. We got the chance to have one meeting so far, but I have let her know that I really want to support the work that she is doing and learn about it and be a partner in that. And also, this actually, I don't know how y'all will feel about this, but I will say it was hard for me to do, but I actually also had a meeting with the Deputy Sheriff's Association. And the reason that was hard for me to do was if you're my district, you know that they sent many mailers out to thousands of people giving me an F on a report card that they created. And so despite that, I wanted to meet with them because, you know, I'm here to build bridges with people and like create a shared vision. And you do have to have somewhat of a working relationship and a positive relationship in order to do that work. So I have met with Christina. I've also met with them, and you know, I told them directly, like, I still want to see justice for Chinedu Akobi, and it got really uncomfortable because there was actually a deputy sheriff there who was one of the responding officers, and so it got a little bit uncomfortable and tense. But you know, I said what I said, and I felt like I'm being direct about that so that you're not surprised. I'm not here to tell you what you know sounds pretty. I'm here to, you know, have honest, direct communication. And you know, I do think that there will opportunities to help Christina in her work. And I've expressed that I'm here and I want to support her. And so I'm waiting to hear about what those opportunities will be. And I also know that she's in the same position that I'm in, right? 2 months in and kind of learning what everything looks and feels like. And so, yeah, I'm sure her and I will continue the conversation and share more info.
Perfect. Okay, Nancy.
Yeah, thank you. And first off, Noelia, it's just such an honor to have you here, and I'm thrilled that you got elected. And full disclosure, I was a strong supporter. We love your support. I wanted to bring up a couple of things, and one is related to what you were talking about. We're really appreciative that you support civilian oversight of the sheriff. I'm with Fix in San Mateo County, and as you know, the club as well as the county party both support that. And just so you know, we have also met with the undersheriff, Chris Shung, and he's a wonderful person. He has done such great things in Mountain View, and he's really, I think, going to help Christina make her vision work, which is a better culture, more of a guardian culture than a warrior culture. So we want to just keep you involved and keep working with you as supervisors. Slocum and Pine continue with their work on the subcommittee, which we've met with as well. My question for you is another area I'm involved with. I'm a member of San Mateo County Coalition of Immigrant Rights. And as I think you know, SIMSR has been, that's what it's called, has been working for more than a decade to try to get the sheriff to stop turning people over to immigration when they get out of jail. This is people who've already served their sentence. They're not a threat to public safety. The judge let them out, the jury let them out, they're done with their sentence, that was dismissed or whatever. Trying not to get them turned over to the jail. And the sheriff did create a policy, but SIMSR has asked the board, which has supported the idea, I mean, some members have, to do what they can, which is to instruct or set a county policy that we will not use county resources. That is to say, they control the county budget, they don't control the sheriff policy. We will not use county fax machines, county door opening bells that open the sally port in the jail so that the ICE truck could come in. county phones so that a deputy could call or a probation officer could call ICE, and in order to help the federal government do its job, unless, of course, there's a judicial or a court warrant, which is very rare, but does happen. And so I know that ordinance is being looked at, and county council has wanted a few exceptions, which don't make any sense because I think they're not understanding the basic principle here, which is that immigrants should be treated as non-immigrants are treated. If they're a criminal, they should be put on trial. If they're convicted, they should go to jail. That's it. We're not asking for a free pass, but it's not up to the sheriff to be the judge of the jury and the executioner. It's not up to the sheriff to decide who's a public safety risk. It's up to the judge, the jury, and the courts. So we would love to have your support on that. And I know a small delegation from SIMSR is going to meet with you, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or have had a chance to look at it at all.
I haven't had a chance to look at it. Is there, I think, so one thing I realized with, like the ad hoc committee that the two other supervisors are working on with oversight, for example, is that if there has been pre-existing work with other supervisors, then I have to wait because of the Brown Act to hear that come publicly before I'm able to provide feedback. But I would love to see, is there like I'm looking forward to the meeting, and I definitely am supportive of that and happy to sponsor that or co-sponsor that. Is there a sponsor already for that work? Or
there's people have talked to, I think, Dave Pine and Dave Canepa, but it's not formal. It's not like the board set up a committee to look at oversight and the committee members are Supervisor Slocum and Supervisor Pine. It's not formal like that. So I think they're still trying to find sponsors or co-sponsors. So at least I wanted to bring it to your attention, and your constituents are going to be meeting with you about it. Your constituents are in SIMSR.
And honestly, I'm all in because I do think this is something that came up in the Air District retreat today too. And something that I'm going to be doing more of. But there's practice in what happens and what one sheriff will do or what one board supervisor will do. And then there's policy and actually like making that a lasting change that is on paper and then in line with practice. So I'm definitely interested in working on that. So yeah.
So if I could interrupt just to be a voice of protection here. Nancy, in those meetings that you had with the other two supervisors, if they express to you their support for what you're doing, then we are endangering Noelia by asking her whether or not she supports, because in the spirit of full disclosure, we are recording this meeting and we're going to put it on our website. And you cannot have 3 supportive votes before it goes public. So I just wanted to forewarn you that we are recording and we don't want to endanger your vote by your being that 3rd supportive person. So I just wanted to get that out there really quickly.
Thank you, Diana. And I haven't been in the meetings. The thing is still in draft, and so I don't know who's supporting it. And so we don't know who's supporting it because of the draft. So
Okay.
Thanks, Noelia.
Okay, Marshall, you're up.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to have multiple questions when I spoke before, and you actually brought up part of the question that I wanted to ask, which has to do with accessibility and respect for others that come before the Board of Supervisors. Many of us have spoken before the Board of Supervisors on a number of occasions over the years. And as a matter of fact, one of the more recent occasions had to do with the sheriff, the previous sheriff, and the taser funding issue. But the point I wanted to make is that accessibility is really important, but currently the way there's accessibility, in other words, when people can speak before the board at one of the meetings, It's totally perfunctory, and it's extremely frustrating because you can go and make your statement, and it's as though they aren't even there, because there's never any kind of not only no response, there's not even acknowledgement that the issue is important to the community. For example, with the taser issue, there were 20 or 30 speakers there that spoke to the board about the issue, and there was no acknowledgement by the board that anybody spoke other than thank you, and now we're going to go on to our business. And that is very disrespectful to the community. So I do hope that when you're considering that kind of change, I hope that can be brought up. I don't know if there's a policy by the Board of Supervisors to never say anything back to people, because some people are totally off the wall. I understand that. But most people come there are very respectful and logical about what they're trying to say. So if you have any ideas about that, I would love to hear your comments. Thank you.
Yes, that's a great question. So I will say that in the meetings, and this is, a city council meeting, a school board meeting, if there is something that is not on the agenda, then the board cannot speak to it because it hasn't been publicly noticed. And that is actually to protect the community, or that's actually to provide the community the right to know beforehand what's going to be discussed and when there will be decisions made on certain things. I wasn't at that meeting, so I can't speak to whether it was agendized or not. But something that we did in the school board that I was on is we started developing these board and community workshops where there could be more of a back and forth dialogue, because we recognize that it can feel very frustrating to be in this kind of formal setting in a formal meeting where there are, many like presentations and agenda items to get through. And so I'm personally really interested in doing like town halls and community convenings, and even something like a board and community workshop where that back and forth dialogue can happen. And I will say also that it has felt a little bit different for me being on this board and seeing and when I was on when I was campaigning and I attended meetings, I definitely had moments where I was like, oh, like there's not enough discussion on this, and it is on the agenda, and like, so I recognize that. And I will say that, there's a very sensitive topic that's come up in the community in the newspaper recently that because it's pending litigation, I can't speak to. But I will say that I'm committed to, and I'll just like name what it is, but the sexual abuse allegations by a former probation officer who's passed away at this point. I won't say anything other than that I'm really disturbed as well by those allegations. And I did not say that at the meeting that we had earlier this week, and I wish that I had. And so I'm kind of working on how I can find kind of that middle ground of recognizing that in the moment, and also walking that fine line of respecting, the Brown Act and Robert's Rules of Orders and the regulations of the meetings. So I don't know if I answered your question completely, but I hope that's helpful.
It is. It's just, they don't even acknowledge often that the person has even said anything. They don't have to agree or disagree. They don't even acknowledge it. And that, I think, to some of us that are thicker skinned, we know. But, the citizen that comes for the first time and just wants to make a statement, it's very, it's very frustrating. And so thank you for your very, as usual, thoughtful and considered response. I appreciate that. Okay.
All right, Gail, you're up.
Yes, this is not a hot issue at the time, but it is a long-range goal of the Social Justice Task Force to see something done about money bail. We're keenly aware of the damaging effects this has on families when family members are incarcerated awaiting trial for sometimes for very long periods. You may have a reaction to this, or we're just putting out there as a concern.
Thank you. I'll say that that is, that kind of falls under the state and the DA's purview, but I'm happy to, like, I'm all about fixing broken systems, and I think that's one of them. And so, yeah, thank you.
Oh, I just remembered that I'm still awaiting a report. I called in to the probation department and spoke to the chief's assistant, hoping to get an update on what they've done with the $6 million from the State Judicial Council that was intended to promote reform of bail and pretrial situations. And so far, I haven't had a response. And I think it would be nice to have a public discussion of this in a public report, which many of us would be very interested in attending.
Sorry, I was muted. So you reached out to the chief of probation, or I'm sorry,
I spoke to his aide. I believe her first name was Monica. And she returned the call eventually, but I haven't heard anything further. I don't think there's been a report to the board. Maybe there has been, and I just didn't know about it. And if there has, we'd be interested to know the content. And if there has not, we'd be interested in seeing that there is a public report.
Okay, I'm just, so the chief of probation, when I hear chief of probation, I hear about Chief Keen, who works with young people, juveniles. But what you're talking about in terms of bail sounds more like a DA Wagstaff issue. So I'm not sure who are you talking about probation under the sheriffs or the DA, or?
My recollection is that the probation department was in charge of evaluating and making recommendations to judges about bail. I could have that wrong. And which recommendations do not have to be followed and often are not. But my recollection is that when we raised this issue with the board, that's where we were referred to have a discussion of this.
Okay,
This is before they got the $6 million.
Okay, thank you. I'll look into that.
Okay, good. All right, Paul.
Good evening, Supervisor Corzo. It's a pleasure to be in the space with you and everyone this morning, this evening. My question is regarding the Measure K funds. I sit on the Reimagine subcommittee created by the Board of Supervisors to reimagine how we can move from a punishment model to a more treatment model for our youth. In here and trying to soften the environment in juvenile hall, I've run into roadblocks with District Attorney Wagstaff. Chief of Probation has been obstructing the entire process completely, and they have been relying on the fact that there is no monies to actually soften the environment, although we have a camp environment with one San Mateo girl being housed there, right? And no boys are allowed there. These Measure K funds that were discussed earlier, has there been a discussion to maybe allocate some of these funds towards softening this environment where, with these recent allegations and with the trajectory, 60-year trajectory of sexual abuse at our juvenile hall, has there been any discussion here to utilize some of that monies to soften this environment that we have here at the juvenile hall slash YSE?
No, in our recent board meetings, we did not discuss that at all.
Okay, all right. And sorry about that. My cat disconnected the phone on me. So, Elsa, you got a last question?
I do, and it's a follow-up to Paul's, where I wish you'd ask one more, and that is, okay, there hasn't been any discussion about it. How does Paul or anybody effectively ask that question of the board and have it discussed among the board, or find a champion, or, you know, at minimum, bring up the issue, and whether it's Measure K funding or whether it's another pot somewhere? What's your advice on how to raise awareness of that among the board?
So I know that this is work that I believe Paul and Johanna have been doing on the JJDPC. Am I getting the acronym right? I sometimes mess up the acronyms. And there is a board liaison. There is a board liaison, which is Supervisor Canepa. So I think he would be able to ask for an update to be agendized to the board. And so that is one avenue. Another avenue is to send the entire board an email, submit something through public comment. Yes, in terms of the Measure K funding. Again, in terms of any pending litigation, we can't comment on that. Yeah.
Okay. Elsa, that answer for now?
Yeah, no, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask one last question of you. So you finished your long running for office, and now you are supervisor, but you're very busy. What's your son think of all of this? Are you home more? Are you more accessible now that you're not running for office? And he's a teenager. How's that working?
You know, right when we started, he walked in, he just got a haircut, and he was like, look at my haircut. And I was like trying not to look because I was trying to focus on this. And so, and I looked real quick. He's like, you can look. I looked real quick. But I have to say, you know, my son goes with his dad most weekends, and I probably have, that's when I have most of my downtime. So I am spending more time at home, definitely less night commitments. But the work is definitely keeping me very busy. So I can't say that it's, you know, a drastic change. Luckily, I have support from my family and my partner who, yeah, I still try to make it to as many basketball games as I can go to, and I'll like be working on email while I'm there and like doing. But yeah, I mean, we're good. He's good. It's probably a good question for me to like sit down and ask him, because I don't know that I've gotten the chance to. So thank you for that question.
Well, and now that you're, 2 months in, it's like, okay, are things kind of settling down? And well, maybe not yet, but maybe they're getting in that direction that things will be a little, I won't say easier, because being a single parent isn't easy, and having a teenager, all you can do is get them through high school and go, whew. So,
yeah,
but
and
Noelia,
he's in basketball, and now he wants to try out for volleyball. So I'm like, oh man, I was gonna get a break for a season, but I don't think so.
No, it just gets busier. And usually it's 2 or 3 things. And so, but Noelia, it's just been a pleasure to have you come and talk to us tonight. And I'm looking at my notes and going, there's so many things and opportunities. So when things come up and you need to, help to get news out, make sure that we're on your list to get notified. We'll put it in our newsletters. We'll make sure we're announcing things at meetings. But if you also need, more grassroots of, you need people coming to speak at a meeting, or you need, however else that we can be supportive, we're right behind you, because we're really excited to see your voice on the Board of Supervisors. And we really hope, I liked what you were saying about, going and talking to kids at the schools. Yes, if we can get them involved, and even just making sure that they're interested in voting, things like that, got to get them young, because then you start that habit. And I've really appreciated all of that, because seeing someone so young on the Board of Supervisors, it just gives me tremendous hope. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
So
And we'll say good night.
inviting me. Have a good night.
You too. All right.
Bye.
Wow. Okay. All right. I am okay. Now I've got to go back to my agenda and go, okay, wow, what's next? I am going to ask Ashley to give a little talk, because news came out recently that National DFA has closed. And while we may have been linked with the national group originally, we're pretty independent now, but there's still a little, that's still part of our history as a club. So Ashley.
Okay, thank you, Susie. Yes, one of our members sent out an email a few weeks ago, an article from Politico, talking about how National DFA had ceased to exist, had closed its doors. And this was a shock because of our history. But one of my first thoughts was, well, I hope people understand that this means no change for us. We have this long history. We go back to 2003, when Bush was getting ready to invade Iraq. And there were untold numbers of intelligent people who knew that this was bogus, that this was going to be a disaster. And we were utterly frustrated by all the cheerleading that was going on to get us into this war. And so we looked around, and there was just one person in the public eye who seemed to be fighting against it, and his name was Howard Dean. He was the former, at that time, maybe, was he still the governor of Vermont? I'm calling on Rob Dickinson, who is the founder of our SMC DFA. Rob?
He stepped down as governor, so I think he was the former governor at the time, but I would have to look that up to be certain.
Okay, so there, and Rob, jump in and help me tell this story. So at that time, Howard Dean spoke at the California Democratic Convention and caused a sensation. And so people started paying attention to him. And then how did the meetup start, Rob?
That was the essence of the Dean campaign, was using a new technology platform called meetup.com, and it allowed groups to self-organize all throughout the country. And it was a very vigorous grassroots campaign. It's sort of really the precursor to what Obama was able to do. And really, we just started meetups all throughout the country. And in California, there was different groups throughout California, through the Bay Area, through Southern California, and we all talked to each other. There was a lot of a real network between these campaign groups, which, and there was also became like a Northern California campaign and a Southern California campaign. So it was pretty active.
Right. At one time, I think there were, I don't know, I've heard 600, I've heard 700, I've heard 800 different meetup groups across the country. And we became Dean for America. So it was DFA. Now, in the course of the primaries, Howard Dean was knocked out of the running. And that's an interesting story. But we looked around, and at that point, we had been together for what, 8 or 9 months, Rob?
Probably,
And
yeah.
we were strangers brought together by this one issue. And we had had the chance to work together and had kind of fallen in love with each other. We worked together well. We were, we were goal oriented. We wanted to change the world. We wanted to save the world. So we decided to stay together as a group and became chartered by the county Democratic Party Central Committee. So with the idea that we would, we were infiltrating the party and would move it more to the left. So we're always very idealistic. Meanwhile, the national DFA group, Dean for America, became Democracy for America, and we assumed that name. And it was kind of a partnership at the first. We felt like we were affiliated, but we soon found we were actually working ahead of that group. They would put in a lot of effort coming up with a subject for one of our meetings and material to support it. And invariably, Carol and I were saying, oh, we did that program 2 months ago. So we were off on our own, and there was less of an affiliation as time went by. We became more independent, so that at the end, when DFA shut its doors at the end of December, we didn't even hear about it until we saw the article in Politico, and we had gone our separate ways. They'd become a PAC that was supporting candidates and issues and fundraising, and we were concentrated on issues and on working with our legislators to help them see issues from our point of view, which we felt was the correct point of view, of course, or we wouldn't be here. So, so DFA is gone. We are still, I've always made the distinction of calling us SMC DFA to emphasize our own identity and not to be thought of as an affiliate or under the wing of the national organization. So we're going to go on the same way. And Rob, I wonder if there's anything else you want to say about national DFA.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think definitely, we have been independent from them for a very, very long time, but I really did respect the work they did. They did a lot of really great grassroots trainings. That was where Arshad, the first one or the second executive director, really came out of, was the training program, teaching people. They really wanted to inspire people to become candidates for city council or school board, and they really wanted to help support that. And they were also they were good about being open to helping out on local issues or state issues. I remember being able to get them to support various legislation in the California legislature, where they, you could ask them to endorse it and take a stand and even send out something to their members, and they would do stuff like that. And it was really pretty helpful. So I think they played a great role. It's kind of sad to see them end, especially sort of go out with a whimper. But they still were a force for change and for some pretty good candidates along the way.
Right. I think when they first started supporting candidates, they had what they called the Dean Dozen. They picked 12 candidates that they were supporting. And in their first group of candidates was this new guy named Barack Obama, I think. So, and they also were so innovative with and Rob, you could speak to this better than I can, with the campaigning and fundraising online. I mean, the Obama campaign gets a lot of credit for that, but they learned it from National DFA.
They totally did. I mean, Dean was very good about seeking lots and lots of small donors, just getting people to donate $20 or something like that. Whereas, you had, when Dean was running, he was really running, his primary opponent was John Kerry, who was thought to be, was going to be the favorite. And, Kerry was really going after all the traditional big dollar Democratic donors. And Dean was just getting people who were frustrated with the status quo and the position on the Iraq war, and people were just giving him $20 and $50, and they put up a fundraising ask on their website and sent out an email, and they'd have this progress bar on there, and they'd raise a bunch of money. And that was really, I think Dean showed what was possible, and that was what really gave Obama the leg up.
Right. So we've had a long history. We will go on stronger than ever. And so not to worry, we're around. We'll always be around.
Yeah.
Well, and to show what we do, we're going to go on and start talking about, we've got 2 resolutions and a proclamation to talk and vote about tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and share so that I can show you oh, Diana, can you let me share? I've got these guys up, or unless you've got them up.
Diana, you're muted if you're saying anything.
Yeah, I've been saying a lot. So I'm trying to find, oh, there's Susie. Okay. There's a little button on her little face, and I see merge, make host. There we go. Sorry about that. Got it?
There we go. Thank you, thank you. All right. So our first resolution, actually, going to this guy. All right. So our first resolution tonight comes from the Social Justice Task Force, and it's a resolution on youth tried as adults. And I'm going to hand over to Nancy Goodband, who prepared the resolution, and I'm sure that there might also be input coming from Joanna. Nancy?
Thank you so much, Susie, and everyone. And I think people got this resolution in advance. And I will remind people that if you're a dues paid up member, you can vote at the end of this. And Susie had asked us to read them in advance. But basically, like she said, this came from the Social Justice Task Force, and Johanna Rasmussen is a member of the Social Justice Task Force and also a commissioner on the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Council, which is the group that created a resolution very similar to this a year ago. So the bottom line is, kids under 18, it's up to the district attorney to decide whether to charge them in adult court or juvenile court. This resolution by the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Commission said charge them as children, charge them as youth if they're under 18. Reason being that everybody from the Supreme Court on down has recognized in recent years that kids' brains work differently, and you're not mature enough to always make good decisions up until even as much as age 26. Supreme Court made it illegal to execute or put people in life in prison if they were under 18. So this resolution says to the district attorney, number one, because kids' brains aren't fully developed and they're not making great decisions. Number two, because we have a juvenile justice system that's designed to rehabilitate children and youth. Then number three, we want you to commit to not trying children as adults. It's a no-brainer. It is common sense. It makes sense in terms of what we know about how the brain works. I shouldn't say a no-brainer. And it is something that the reason we're bringing it forward, Social Justice Task Force is bringing it forward, because we think that if we can vote for it and we can bring it even further to the party, the Central Committee, and pass something like this, this may sway the district attorney, which has totally ignored the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Commission's efforts, I shouldn't say totally, for the last year, but has not made this commitment, has said, well, sometimes I'll tell you before I try them as an adult, but it's really up to me to do it. So we're just trying to get more community backing for this common sense effort. And if people have questions, I would ask Johanna to answer, or Paul Bocanegra, who I believe is a new DFA member tonight. And he's also a commissioner on the Juvenile Justice Commission. And if there's no questions, we can just vote yes.
And I'm going to ask Ashley to make sure that we're doing this in the correct order. But am I okay to open up for discussion?
First, let's have someone make a motion that we endorse this resolution, and then then you can open it for discussion.
I'll make
Perfect.
that motion, Ashley.
I'll second.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you. All right, we are now open for discussion, and Joanna, I'll let you start.
Thank you. My hand was up to make the motion, but I just, that's okay. I just wanted to add that this is very timely, because there are 3 juveniles in San Mateo County that are facing transfer hearings to adult court at this very moment. So it is very timely.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Elsa?
Do you think anybody in this county who's not in this room at the time or on your commission has a clue that juveniles in our district in our county are sometimes treated as adults? And how much media have you been able to get for particularly that example, Johanna, of 3 youth are about to be moved to an adult prison? To me, that's just a gigantic headline that ought to come forth.
Well, my colleague, Paul Bocanegra, and I, we've worked very hard to get out in the community, sort of grassroots in the neighborhoods and communities that are over policed and over, harshly prosecuted, letting people know, that we're doing this work and sort of trying to bring them on board to spread the news to the other communities about that this is happening. I think that a lot of times, just like earlier Commissioner Corzo said, that the juvenile hall didn't come up in the Measure K funding conversations. I think a lot of times we forget that we've got kids up there. And in my opinion, they're some of our most vulnerable community members, in the county. And so I think often if it's not on the front page of the paper, then it's not in people's purview, like they're not thinking about it. And so I think we've tried to put it out on social media. We have a Google Doc, we have a petition. We've met with the district attorney. We're trying everything possible, but having the opportunity to come to groups such as this helps. And having you support this helps our work, and having you share this work with others makes it even more impactful. So thank you very much.
And can you also therefore say, here are the board meetings where we want you to talk, here are the addresses we want you to send letters to, blah, 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 to try to make more of that happen? But, oh, I'm sorry, your point about the Measure K funding, sounds as though Measure K could address a hell of a lot of issues. I don't know if 100 million is enough to do all the issues that could line up, but between Measure K and their own $4.2 billion budget, there's got to be something.
And I think there is another resolution about youth services, but I would like people to focus right now, and so we can get out of here on time. Does anyone have questions about why you'd maybe want to try kids as adults, or objections, or more discussion, or could we kind of vote?
Yeah, I call the vote. I
Thank you. Thank you, Marshall. I thought that's what you were going to say. Yes. All right. So Ashley, just to make sure, so I believe we want to vote first on closing discussion.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
you have to vote on Marshall's motion.
Okay. So all those in favor of So first of all, let's make sure everybody's hands are down, and then wait till the question, and then we'll put them up. So if everyone, and I'm going to go ahead, let me stop share for a minute, because that way it'll be easier to see. So the motion right now is to close discussion. So all those in favor of closing discussion on this resolution, please raise your hand. Okay, I have to manually because, okay. All right. I think, and mind you, this is members only. So, okay. Very good. Okay. Is there anyone in dissent, in opposition?
Lower your hand if you voted yes already.
Okay. Is there any opposition? Okay, thank you. All right. Now the vote is in. All those in favor of approving this resolution, please raise your hand. Okay. All right. That looks like a good number. Thank you very much. We're now going to go on to resolution number 2.
It sounds like the resolution passed.
Yes, thank you. Yes, let me clarify that. Yes, it passed.
Susie,
All
can
right.
we ask if we can bring this forward to the Democratic Central Committee, or does that require a different motion?
That is not up to us, I don't think.
No, that has nothing to do with us.
Okay.
Resolutions can only be brought up to the Central Committee by Central Committee members.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
So there's
You know lots of those.
several of us who will take care of that.
Okay. So we're on now to resolution 2, supporting improvements at the Youth Services Center. So Nancy, if you can give us an overview.
Again, this to me is a no-brainer. The Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Commission is tasked with an annual inspection at the Youth Service Center, which is what we call the juvenile hall. Kids are kept in separate cages, although the probation department doesn't refer to them as that. And they generated a 60-some page report with recommendations in it. The recommendations are along the lines of really pretty basic stuff. And it's because the kids are really the wards of the state. They're the wards of the county. We're kind of their de facto parents. So they're asking for better food service. Specifically before the pandemic, they cooked food on site. Now they get it from the sheriff and kids can't eat it. They want better health and hygiene. For example, all of the kids are kids of color, and they've taken away from time to time, and as a punishment, hygiene like shampoo and soap that is ethnically more appropriate, and so kids end up with itchy skin and stuff. So it's just health and hygiene. Decent mattresses that are a little thicker. Those are examples of why we're saying health and hygiene. Mental health services, they recommend that there be a closed door so that there's a separate room if you're having a mental health meeting with your counselor, that it's not open to other people. Vocational services in the Youth Services Center. And these recommendations were unanimously adopted by the commission in December, or I'm sorry, in December, yeah, December 13th at their meeting. And so we're just thinking, kind of like what people were saying about Measure K, no one's paying attention to it. We were thinking, let's get ourselves on record to say, we think that these kids should be treated with some dignity and respect. And we just are asking the Board of Supervisors to adopt those the recommendations in the report and ask the probation department to implement them. So again, it's pretty simple. And thanks for putting the report in the chat, Johanna. And Johanna is on our task force and the commission, and Paul is on the task force. So any questions? Let's keep the questions just on this topic.
All right. And Ashley, we need a motion.
I'd like to
I move that we approve it.
I second.
Perfect. All right. We are now open to discussion. Are there any questions? please raise your hand if you've got a question. I'm not seeing any questions.
All in favor?
Okay. Since there's no discussion, we don't need to vote on closing it. So Ashley, are we okay to take a vote on the motion?
Let's
Yes.
go for it.
Okay. All right. I'm going to close the share so we can see everybody. And if you would please raise your hand, all members in favor.
Oh my gosh, where'd it go?
There we go.
I know,
And you
but
can
it
raise it.
disappeared. The whole thing went away.
Nancy, if you're trying to vote in favor, you could say it out loud and she can count you.
Yeah, and you can just raise your hand too. There's not too many of us here, so. Okay. Yes, I see us in favor. Thank you so very much. That resolution has passed. And now we have a third piece up in front of us tonight, and this is a proclamation. And this is coming from the Climate Change Task Force. Flavia, if you want to go ahead and give us a little talk. Oh, and go ahead, if you would please lower your hands from the vote.
Okay.
And then Flavia.
Thank you, Susie. What I am trying to do with this proclamation is bring this to your attention. Food Waste Prevention Week actually started in California, and by a group of activists, I'm not sure who or where, and it was picked up by Florida, and Florida took it and started running with it, and got more states involved. And last year, the Department of Environmental Quality for Oregon got involved, and they're actually, there is a website called foodwastepreventionweek.com. And a lot of the artwork that you see on their website was developed by Oregon's Department of Environmental Quality. So basically, the points covered here, the reason why I'm bringing this proclamation up is a lot of people don't really understand that food waste is a major driver of climate change. If food waste were a country, it would be the third biggest contributor towards greenhouse gas emissions. And the reason for that is food waste generates a lot of methane gas, and methane gas is 80 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2 in the short term. It doesn't last very long. It lasts maybe 10 years, but in that first 20 years, it's 80 times more powerful as to contribute towards global warming than CO2 is, even though CO2 will last for 100 years up there. So basically, by attacking food waste and minimizing food waste, we can buy ourselves some time while we're getting all these other electrification and divestment from fossil fuels into our systems. It will buy us some time if we really go after this. And that the country is behind these goals. They want to reduce food waste by 50% by the year 2030, I believe. And so all of these whereases are really important, and it will save people money, because in this country, we waste a lot of food. We throw it out because we just let it go bad in our refrigerator. We buy too much and we can't use it. The leftovers aren't really appealing, whatever. And so this is, us trying to make a statement that we're going to treat food as the valuable commodity, the gift of nature that it is. And we'll try and do better. And we'll talk to others about doing better too. So I think that just about covers it. Susie, is there any, I guess I'll stop talking and let you guys do your thing on this.
Well, so I'm looking for a motion. Do I hear a motion?
I so move that we approve this San Mateo County Democracy for America and Food Waste Prevention Week proclamation.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I am now opening this up for discussion, and I see Gail, you've got your hand up. And you're muted, Gail. There you
Just
go.
remind you quickly that food waste is also water waste. But that
Very
it's not all residential. Obviously, a lot of it is wasted before it goes to market by taking out things that are unattractive. And there's also in some areas a
Yeah.
huge waste of rodents getting at the food.
All right. Pam, you're next.
I'm just curious about what is the education going forward? I mean, we can make a proclamation but for me, I'm not certain that it says what people need to do. I mean, you can have a week, I'm not sure how it gets publicized, but what are we asking people to do? Not buy as much food, tell restaurants not to over serve food. I mean, I just don't understand because.
Right. It is a difficult subject because food is it's a very personal, intimate thing, and it's also a very social thing, right? But it's also something that we need to do. Like everybody needs to breathe, and everybody needs to drink water, and everybody needs to eat. So a lot of awareness about food storage tips, about your purchasing practices and your eating practices. So all of those things, and there is going to be like a social media campaign. So once we join this, we can repost on our website and our social media the tips for reducing food waste. And also too, personally, up here in Oregon, I'm going to be asking our municipalities, county and city, to make the same kind of proclamation, and also I'll be posting it on my group's website up here as well. And I gathered the support just by asking my collaborator organizations. I asked about 20 different organizations, churches and so forth, and other environmental organizations, if they would support my request to have our municipality make this proclamation. I'm spreading the awareness and making them know, letting them know that if they want to fight climate change, they should also be talking about food. So later on in March, I'll be making a presentation to our main environmental organization up here about food waste and climate change. So that's one way I'm doing it, with education and outreach.
But Flavia, I have to say, you're getting to a niche market, right? You're getting to us, you're getting to the environmental people, but it has to be a bigger campaign than that to make it make sense.
So I respect and understand what Pam is saying, but I also think it's important to recognize that most people do not really appreciate that there is a food waste issue. They don't even think about it. They think if I can afford to buy X amount and I only use 2/3 of it, well, that's, I can afford it. It's not a problem. So this is just, it seems to me, this is an educational effort to just bring to people's attention that this is an issue that's not just a matter of whether you can afford it. It's a matter that is a interest and concern for the whole community, because this waste is contributing to global warming. It's contributing to water waste. And so we need to pay attention to it from more than just whether you can afford it. So that's what I want to say. And I also want to mention that parenthetically, that David Waterbury has his hand up because he apparently doesn't know how to do it online, if I understand. Thank you.
Marshall, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that the mechanism for getting the word out is broad enough. It's not just the people that go out.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. That's another step we should take. Yeah.
So Pam, I do want to tell you that during World War I, they made a major national campaign out of not wasting food because it was part of the war effort, right? Because, you know, we were sending all these troops overseas and so forth. So they actually had tips for reducing food waste broadcast. Now, they didn't have social media back then. They didn't have TV back then. I don't even know if they had radio. They just had posters. So, you know, we can make use of it, and it is growing. I mean, I think it's a huge leap from 2 years ago or 3 years ago to now. It's a huge leap forward, and it'll be even bigger in the future. And it's not just my algorithms telling me that.
Thank you.
I'm going to go on to Ashley.
Oh, okay. My two suggestions are just cosmetic in the text itself. And that is in the first line, whereas up to 35%, up should not be capitalized. It's the second word in a sentence. So up should be lowercase. The
Right
U.
here. Okay. Mhm.
And then down in the last clause, now therefore do we, to set apart now therefore do we, San Mateo County Democracy for America, comma, a political advocacy organization, comma, just to make that consistent. We can't have one punctuation at the beginning and a different one at the end. So that should just be America, comma, a political advocacy organization. Okay.
Are those changes, minimal changes that we can make?
Are they agreeable to
Yes.
you, Claudia?
Yes. Yes.
I don't think it changes the meaning of it at all.
No.
No.
Or cosmetic, as you say.
Okay.
Yeah, cosmetic.
Okay. So Nancy, on to you.
I just wanted to say that I never realized how much food we waste until we got a, you know, compost thing from our trash collector. And I don't think anybody does until they start to see and collect it, how much food we waste. And we've always thought we don't waste any food. Well, we do. There are shavings and all sorts of things. So I think we need everything we can to get the message across that we need to stop wasting food. We grow so much more than we need, and that all that agriculture takes so much out of our environment.
All right. On to David. And let's
I was
trying to speed up because we're running out of time tonight.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. Around here in San Mateo County, that the food waste goes in the green can, at least, and we as a club, I'm also associated with, do a lot of composting and things like that. And so some of the food waste is things like, well, like apple core is just food waste, and peelings, and a lot of things are not exactly, many of these things are not edible items or expired food and things like that, but there's nothing in here about, as far as I know, the food waste should not be going into landfills, at least where I live anyway. And I'm not sure what the how things work in Oregon or Medford or that area, but you know, it's, I don't know, just the whole thing, like, people are gonna look at this and they're gonna say, well, food in landfills. No, we put our food in the green can, which I understand is recycled as compost. And so,
Right.
no, I'm just not real thrilled about the whole thing, to be honest with you.
But when, so I get your point, David, and the point is that there's a lot of labor and carbon footprint associated with just growing the food, using up the land, the water, the labor, and the transportation. And so you're making, by, let's say that 1/3 of the food that you purchase ends up getting thrown away. Well, it does get composted, but by not using the food efficiently, you're making the carbon footprint of the food system that much bigger, because it takes 30% more food to feed a person that wastes a lot of it than it does to feed a person that doesn't waste, that wastes as little as he can or she can. So do you understand what I'm saying? Composting doesn't solve the problem.
I want to add one thing too, is that it's really important to understand that we have a green bin here locally. The green bins are not universal. And it's not even universal in California, although there was just a recent law saying that, yes, you will. So, and this is talking about, let's make it across the board so that everybody is putting food waste into the green bin or a local compost rather than into the landfill. Guys, we're really running out of time, but I've got Gail and then Nancy. Gail, you're muted.
And people who are thrifty are already not wasting much food. And just because you have a lot of things in your compost bin, I don't know if that counts as waste. You know, the peels and the cores. I mean, most people don't eat orange peel and they don't eat the apple core. I don't think you're supposed to. So I'm not sure that much of it is residential, but it's good not to waste. It's always good to encourage people not to waste. But I'm not sure that residential waste is the major driver of food waste globally.
It actually is, Gail. Statistically, 40% of the waste occurs from homes, from residential.
Really, and not in the field where they discard the stuff that doesn't look good.
No.
Whoa.
That's more like 16%.
It would be interesting to get, more information about this, because obviously,
guys,
thank you.
We're not going to even have any time for task force reports because we're almost out of time for the whole meeting. Nancy, you got one last comment, because we've got to get into a calling the vote. And Nancy, you're muted.
Yeah.
There you go.
Here in San Mateo County, that green bin goes into a process that eventually makes all that garbage, so to speak, into something usable for farmers to improve their crop production without having any chemicals. And so here in San Mateo County, our trash and our composting stuff is handled well. So it works to improve agriculture. That isn't true everywhere, but we all have stuff like pits and whatnot, that apple pits and whatnot that we throw away, but there's so much else other than that, and the waste in restaurants and all that kind of stuff. But here it's handled correctly, so it is worthwhile to have it.
Marshall?
Yeah, this is an educational thing. Just one more thing we can do better than not doing it. I call the vote.
Okay, thank you, Marshall.
Question.
And Ashley, if you'll help me, do I have a?
We have to vote. We have to vote on calling the vote.
So
Okay.
Susie, Marna
All
did have her hand up.
Marna has had her hand up for a long time.
Yeah, Marna had her hand up.
I don't.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing that because I'm.
She had her physical hand up.
She has a
Okay.
physical hand up, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Marna. Sorry.
I don't get that hand up on the screen that all of you have, but I want to know that for decades, we've been, using our own garbage, our own humus pile. And so it's just born into us that every single bit that we scrape off our plate goes into our humus pile. And I would think that would be making methane. So would you please?
Yes, it is. It is.
Stop our backyard humus piling?
Yes, we want to.
If it's exposed to air, it doesn't create methane. But if it's buried without air, it creates methane.
It's just in a pile.
So think of it as if you're putting it into your green bin or your backyard composter, you're doing the right thing. But if you're putting it into the black bin garbage, then it's going into the landfill. That's the problem. And so this is an education of we need to make sure everybody's using the green bin, and especially communities that don't have green bins yet, we need to try and encourage them that they need to get this. I mean, it's state mandated, but it's not it's not there yet. So,
but if you want it, they have to give it to you.
Okay, but Nancy, if your community doesn't have that in place yet, they're still building it. Okay, not every community has Recology who has this program already in place.
Yeah,
but they will have to build it. So the vote has been called. All those in favor of closing the vote, please raise your hand.
Closing discussion.
Closing discussion. Thank you. Get the right. Okay. All right. Any in opposition?
No, I am.
Okay.
No, I'm not. Lower hand.
Okay, so Ashley, we do have the majority in support of closing discussion. Do we then close?
Yes.
Yes, so we vote on the proclamation.
Okay, so now all those in favor of this proclamation, and it's again, we're just trying to do an education policy talking about the Food Waste Week. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Okay. Please put your hands down. All those in opposition. Okay, so I've got
Elsa,
1,
you're
2,
opposed?
3.
Oh, no, I'm not opposed. I voted for it.
Okay, so in opposition, if you'd raise your hands again. Okay, I got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we are in majority though still. So Ashley, are we? Yes, we're approving. Okay.
We are done.
So, we are now at 2 minutes to the hour. We did not get to task force reports. I want to ask the task forces, is there anything that you really need to get out to us tonight?
Yes.
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Okay.
The Elections Task Force meets on the second Monday of the month at 7 o'clock. Please join us.
Okay. All right. Diana?
Okay, Social Justice meets the second Friday of the month at 7 o'clock. And let me know if you're interested in joining us. And the Redwood City will be having its own homeless count, a one-day homeless count on March 15th. If anyone's interested in joining that process, please let me know.
Elsa?
Thank you. There are a good number of things happening both nationally and locally for, statewide for CalCare. This is about healthcare, by the way, to support CalCare, and I will send something to talk that mentions that. But also, very importantly, to fight against Medicare Advantage, which takes 15% off the top, and ACO REACH, which takes 40% off the top from the money given to it by the Medicare Trust Fund. And it's the ongoing privatization of healthcare versus Medicare really takes 1 to 2% to administer. They say 3% because they don't think anybody will believe the 1 to 2%. Anything you can do to write your legislators and to fight back about this would be great. You'll get a note about it. Thank you.
What did you say was taking so much percent? Tell me the percentage.
So Medicare itself is administered for only 1 to 2%. By the way, all of this is.
So who takes 40%?
I'm
That
getting
was
it.
the question, I think.
Yeah.
No, I think it was 2%, Marsh. The Medicare Trust Fund pays out all of this money. And it's half the money spent on healthcare in this country. Medicare takes 1 to 2 percentage points off the top to administer the payments. Medicare Advantage, which is 60% of Medicare insurance people, takes 15% off the top. This new
And
thing
they're going to take up to 35% in the future.
Wow.
Well, so there's a new thing, ACO REACH, which is only 2.1 million people now, which by law can take 40% off.
That's what I wondered about, the 40%.
Right.
What is that?
That was the question, right?
What is that?
I don't think so, Marshall. That's called ACO REACH, and it was started by the roommate of Jared Kushner when the other guy was in the White House. It is purely Wall Street firms who say, "Oh my God, look at all the money that goes into Medicare. Let's go do something about
You know
that."
about this?
And they set up ACO REACH, where they set up companies that go in and say to the parents of the physician groups, "We will give you rebates and we will do all your paperwork for you." And they do all the paperwork for them. By taking that 40% for their profitability, there's only 60% left for clinical care.
Right.
Guess what?
Wow, that's scary.
Okay, Gail, did you have something more? Gail? You're muted.
Yeah, 5 to 7 Friday. It's called a Global Climate Strike, and that is at Witten Plaza, which is 100 University Avenue in Palo Alto.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other announcements or task force?
Well,
okay.
I hope you write to the governor or phone the governor and tell him to obey the environmental laws and not and to rescind his executive action that's unwarranted.
Yeah, I've been trying to follow those emails. All right.
What is the executive option
He set
you want us?
he set aside the water quality in order to allow diversion of more water from the Delta into the Central Valley for those giant plantations. It's
Well,
just,
and part of this
political
was
power.
too,
Pardon?
isn't part of this that he's holding back water from going into the Delta?
Well,
holding
yeah,
it back in the reservoirs?
He may be doing that as well, yeah. So
yes.
Not only are environmental groups up in arms about this, but the Indian tribes in California who were cut out of water rights way back when they didn't have any power at all, are very much up in arms about this. It hits them very hard.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead at this point and say thank you, everyone, for being here. It's been a really good evening, and I just loved hearing from Noelia, and really, hoping we can help her shake up the Board of Supervisors. Wouldn't that be a great thing?
Thank you all.
Yep. And everybody take care, stay healthy. Let's not have any more COVID, okay?
Yeah, right.
All right. Everyone take care and have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Yeah,
Bye.
good night.